can I bear my beauty when I know I'm broken? I can bear my brokenness knowing that I'm meant to become beautiful, but can I bear the beauty that already exists? And for many men, but most people, I think have a very hard time embracing and enjoying the glory that they reveal about the glory of God.
Welcome to 3%. We're your hosts, Jamie Haig.
And I'm Blake Roberts.
We're two best friends, fathers, husbands, and just two guys trying to figure it out.
We're also therapists, which is probably a pretty important part.
That's true.
And we believe that at our best, people are 97% honest with themselves and others. And it's that hidden 3% of emotions, needs, desires, and behaviors that we keep to ourselves that keep us bound to shame and loneliness, from which many of our issues stem.
Each week on this podcast, we'll interview leaders in the fields of psychology, theology, arts, and athletics to explore holistic masculinity. We're not here to tell you the man you need to be, but we are here to help you explore what gets in the way of being the man you want to be.
We're going to help you develop courage and give you the tools to share your 3% in the relationships that matter most, so you can more deeply connect with yourself, God, and others. So, pull up a chair.
Let's get into it.
So let's be honest. Let's be honest. Let's be honest.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the 3% Podcast. This is going to be super fun today. We have some familiar faces on at once. So if you guys were here for season 1, very early on, I think one of the first few episodes, Jamie?
Yeah, one of the first 3, I think.
We had the privilege of having Dr. Dan Allender on the show to talk about his latest book. And you can go back to that episode and listen to us gush over how excited we were to have him on our show because of how inspirational he was in our own early recovery journeys and then becoming therapists. And then later, we got to have, who is with us today, also Rachel Chen on. And they are both the co-hosts of the Allender Center podcast, which has been around since like before people were even podcasting, I think. You guys have been doing this show for a minute.
When dirt was discovered.
You guys actually made podcasting cool.
Oh yeah.
There it
yeah,
is.
back when we were podcasting with our little recorders that picked up like the train going by. It was a good time.
That's awesome.
It's a show that has been downloaded so many times and has had a huge impact, just a wave of impact for many people in my circle and beyond that. And they're just two voices that are, how did I describe them? I just said I didn't write an intro and I was going to see what came up to my mind.
Should we add a few words? I can speak for Rachel. Troubled.
How about you guys? You guys give words for each other.
Rachel
choked up already.
Yeah, she's really choked up, but troubled, but brilliant. And I'm speaking of Rachel. Troubled, but brilliant, and always with a sheen of the glory of God.
Wow.
All right, follow that up, Rachel. How would you describe Dan?
I'm going to Dan is a little more of a comedian than I am on the spot. I have to be thinking about it. So I would just say, Dan, I've been very privileged to have Dan as a mentor and a teacher and a friend for many years now. He's one of the most generous people I know as far as like being willing to give away what he's been given so that more people can experience healing. And so he's a bit of a curmudgeon, very wise.
Oh, that's a good one.
And as he tells me often, the French meter of normal.
Thank you. Yeah. I resided in the Louvre for a period of time in that particular structure as the French meter of normalcy.
That's incredible.
That's amazing. So we're super stoked to have them on with us. Our first episode with 4 people, I think, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be a little chaotic. So buckle up.
I think the generosity of both Dan and Rachel can be summed up in the fact that they came on season 1 of our podcast.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
So,
privileged. Come on.
Yeah,
it really
absolutely.
was. And
Well,
knowing
you.
what you have allowed your lives to invite people to, and the playfulness that you each bring to the process. What an honor.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
very kind. So tell them what we're going to talk about today, Jamie. Give the listeners a
Yeah.
little bit of a taste of what to expect.
Well, I think a lot of what we talked about last season on the show, we joked. We were on another podcast for a host named Tim Hull, and he asked us, what was like your scheduling process for, like, how did you think of like what guests you wanted to have on when? And we started laughing because it really was just like, okay, who's a hero of ours? Who can we talk to? And what can we force them to talk about? And there was no real cohesive thought necessarily, other than we want to help men feel more connected to themselves, others, and God. Well, I think we need to set the table this season for what does it look like to really start that approach. And I think there's no more appropriate way than looking at your own story.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we were hoping to talk about today is, well, both of you on the Allender Center podcast, Dan, they even had me work through your To Be Told book in grad school. So you both emphasize engaging in the particularities of your stories rather than avoiding them. So why would you both say that story work for men in particular, but that work in general, why would you say that it's so important? And then we can get into some other questions like what happens if you don't, but why would you say that it's so important to engage in your story?
Well, I can jump in, and then I'm going to turn it to Dan, who I've learned most of this from. It's a little like humbling to be pointed at by him to jump in.
No pressure.
But you know, we recently were privileged to have you as guests on our podcast, and you know, we were having a conversation about this place, especially for men, of strength and tenderness, or strength and vulnerability. And part of why story and past story is so important is because it has deeply shaped our capacity to be both strong and vulnerable. It's like deeply shaped how much vulnerability we can bear. And I think especially for men, like in that conversation, part of what I was thinking, and I hope this is not offensive, is like, oh, thank God I'm a woman, because I'm not afraid to cry. Like, I've been socialized in such a way that in some ways, like, I'm expected to cry. Like, even if tears in the social constructs are seen as a weakness, like, no one's ever said, well, it's not true. I have been told multiple times, stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. But as far as like, because of being a girl, no one's been like, girls don't cry, you know? And thinking about the ease of tears that come when I'm talking to like another woman, that there's not like oh, I'm sorry, I'm crying. You know, it's just like, of course you're crying. That makes a lot of sense. And so just thinking about how many places in our stories, you put words to this in our previous conversation, where we've needed attunement, we've needed good care, we've needed someone to make meaning out of the harm or the pain we're experiencing to help us metabolize it. And that hasn't happened, or the person who's supposed to be doing that is actually the person bringing the harm, or they're doubling down in a shaming way, to where we make these deep commitments in our little persons of like, you know, how I was feeling that pain is bad, or I should be ashamed, or no one's going to be there to help me with this pain. So I need to keep it as far from myself as I can. I was weak to have felt this pain, like whatever the message is that comes. And we don't get to kind of undo that by just like, you know, time doesn't heal all wounds. Like those messages travel with us and they get reinforced. And so what does it look like to go back to a story where we've known profound neglect or harm or humiliation or dishonor, and be able to get close to the places in the story where that was experienced and have a different experience where someone can maybe attune to that young part of us in a way we really needed,
Mhm.
or can help us see the truth of the moment in a way that our little selves just couldn't, because we needed to keep that attachment. Or bring honor to parts of us that just are in desperate need of honor.
Mhm.
And how when we do that, because when we're talking about our stories, we're talking about, Dan, you said this, neural pathways. So we're talking about our bodies and the ways we hold memory. It actually changes something in us. It opens up new possibilities. And that capacity to grieve, where we've not known like the honor of grief, it changes us. And it like allows that thing that's been like blocked or been like become such a heavy burden to become lightened. And it's just
Yeah.
really hard to do story work on ourselves,
Yeah.
because we need other interpreters and meaning makers, and
Yeah.
we need other people to attune to us. Unfortunately, that's how we're made. Like if we could figure it out for ourselves, I'm sure all of us would.
Right.
How can I offer myself what I most need so that I never have to trust another human being to do that?
I haven't
that would
figured
be
it out
my-
yet. I've been trying, but I haven't got
Yeah.
there.
So Dan, I don't know what you would say.
That's beautiful.
Well, the reality that we replay, often unwittingly, patterns that literally are formed neurologically for how we defend ourselves or how we go about trying to find what our hearts so deeply crave. Until we deal with what shaped us, we have no clue at times why we continue to do certain things. Like we were doing something we call the narrative-focused trauma care process. And one of the teachers was teaching, I was listening, and they were talking about an experience that they had had when they were like 4th or 5th grade. And why this moment, even though I think I've done a lot of good story work on my behalf and on others, I had a memory return that I had never had before. And that was 4th grade is where our community began to prepare you for playing football in high school. And so 4th grade, I'm in a context where, you've got a drill, we've got a ball runner, you've got somebody blocking, and you're the defensive player. You've got to push the kid out of the way and tackle. Well, I got knocked down, and I'm a 4th grader, and I started to whimper. And remember the coach standing over me, and he was, of course, I'm in 4th grade. He's standing over me, and he shouts, "Don't be a pussy." I wasn't sure what a pussy was. I don't know what it meant, but I did know this. It was not good. And in that moment, there was a locking in. If I want to be what this coach and what my team or what my peers, I got to, first of all, figure out what a pussy is. But beyond that, I got to make sure I am never, whatever that implies. And so the reality of a hatred of vulnerability, a hatred of tears, a hatred of needing help, in so many ways, I'm not going to say that my whole life was shaped by this one single story, but for that to come back a couple weeks ago, and then to be on a walk with my wife, telling her that story, and she then began to say, tell me about because she knows exactly the elementary school where we were practicing. And she was like, where was the field? And as soon as she asked that question, I could feel something tighten in me. And then she said, do you remember what the equipment looked like? What did your helmet look like? In other words, she's inviting me to step further into the particularity of the story. And I literally barked at her. And I just went, don't go there. And because I have a remarkable wife, she looked at me and she said, because that might make you feel like a pussy. Oh,
Come on, Becky.
come on, Becky. Undone. I'm undone. And now I'm playing out as a 73-year-old man what I was experienced as a 9-year-old boy. Yeah, you got to go back to those stories to begin the process of redemption.
Hey, we want to pause real quick and let you know about something. We know a lot of you don't just want more content. You want connection, you want practice, you want tools, you want depth. And that's why we created The Basement. It's our private community for anyone who's ready to go beyond surface level and actually engage their emotional lives. So every month we release a deep dive Q&A episode that's only available inside the community. We answer real questions from real listeners in a more intentional way than we do on our regular feed. We also share guided reflections and practical tools to actually help you apply this stuff. And you'll be connected to other people who are doing the work too.
It's $10 a month or $100 for the year, and you can cancel anytime. And honestly, even if you've been listening to our podcast for a while and you're not sure how much you'd use The Basement, becoming a member is still a great way to support what we're building. It helps us create more spaces, more conversations, and more resources for anyone who wants and needs them. So check out the link that will be in the show notes. If you're ready for more than just listening, come join us in the basement.
Okay.
Whoa.
Okay. If listeners aren't already buckled up, you might want to put your seatbelt on. 3 things that I want to say. One, I'm really glad actually that you used that example, because I know so many people listening, so many men listening have been told that or called that as a derogatory way, demeaning way when being vulnerable. And so I still have friends that still use that as like a joking insult, and it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
And that's a whole separate conversation we can have. I'm glad you named that. If you're hearing Dan say that and you notice a little something in you that resonates with maybe being called that, but having minimized it yourself, that's something to pay attention to. One other thing, and then I have a question. Maybe these are 2 questions. I don't know. I am, like, for those who aren't listening, Dan has been doing this work that we're talking about for a few years, maybe.
Tried decades.
He's been doing it for a long time. And the reason I'm particularly glad that you used that example of a story coming up recently is it's actually incredibly encouraging to me, because it shows that the purpose of story work is maybe the goal of it is an unending, lifelong process. Like, it's not a story, it's not an exercise that you do and then finish. And I know so many, I still can take that approach in my own journey, but especially if you're like early into doing this new kind of work, the desire to sort of like figure it out to then complete it misses the whole point, as you just named, Dan. And then that bridging into the question, which is, if somebody listening to this is newer to the concept or the idea of story work, you've been writing about this for decades. You guys talk about it every week on your podcast. We're therapists. We talk like we we know without even really thinking about it what that means. But let's say somebody's listening and they're like, oh, I kind of am like resonating with something of what you guys are saying. But story work or engaging their story is a new thought to them. I kind of want to hear from each of you, because I wonder if they would be different. How would you sum up what that actually is, or what it means, in like a sentence or 2? And you're being pointed at first this time.
Yeah. Well, it rightfully, if I pointed at her, she has every right to put me. Let's just say this. We think in stories. The Bible is 70% story. So the reality is, we don't think thoughts. We think within the realm of narrative. People, plot, process, time, space. It's how we organize. That's how we have been created by God. So when we invite people to story work, what we're ultimately doing is we're inviting you to know who you are, how you have become who you are, and something of what's going to need to occur for you to become the person you're meant to be. So in some sense, foundation, origin, the process, and also the endpoint, the telos of who you are meant to be in this world is all narrative. And so the more we've got language, like, why do you watch Netflix? Why do you go to movies? Why do you tell the story of what your trip to the Bahamas was like when you could say, oh, it was good? No, you tell a story because that's what connects us, not only to one another, but to ourselves.
I like that. It's fun. It's fun having listened to someone over so many years. For me, 20 years now, which is wild. Wow. Makes me, I'm in middle age now. It's a great time. And you're still alert, like you're still hearing something in a way that's revelatory and new, or like deepening. And so, yeah, I think for myself these days, the way I think about story work, and I'm going to get a little theologically nerdy because that's what I like to do.
Please do.
Is
awesome.
It is like embodied hermeneutics. It's a play with embodied hermeneutics, meaning like the art of reading, the art of interpretation, the art of meaning making. Because when I think about what are we doing with story work, at least the way we do it at the Allender Center, we're asking people to bring a story of harm that has shaped them, that they would say has impacted them. You know, something that's not necessarily on the scale of like a 1 to 10 to the 10, where you maybe need to be more in a therapeutic frame, but something that you go, yeah, this story, maybe it's a familiar story that played out in many different developmental ways, right? Or you just, like Dan just put words to, it had impact
so
in a way that's still
like a specific story. Like my parents got divorced when I was 9.
Yes. Or I was, bullied. I was shamed in this moment of play. I moved towards my parent in a moment of play and I got punished. I was abused, right? Like it could be so many different things, right? And we're asking someone to entrust other people to hold the story and to get into the story. Now, what's true is children are incredible observers, don't have the luxury to be good interpreters, right? Because of attachment. Like we're going to interpret in a way that allows us to keep primary attachments. So usually we're going to internalize the harm. We're going to say, I was bad. I deserved it. I must have been stupid. I must have been provocative. I must have been foolish. I must have been weak. Like whatever we do to like survive, those are coping mechanisms that we need. So when I think about hermeneutics, it's like we're saying there is a truth I've named from this story about myself, about other people, and certainly about God. And am I willing to let the interpretation I've held like be messed with because of what the story is revealing? Because we can go back to something as an adult, right? We're usually doing work with childhood stories that we can take our adult resources and like these communal resources. And obviously we have facilitators who are trained to do this, and look at the interpretations we've made in an embodied way, get closer to the truth of the story. So kind of what Dan put language to. Becky invited him to get closer to the embodied truth of this story, right?
And I'm not pleased. I am not pleased.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good. And we don't always, like, it's a movement of I don't start, like, I've written stories before that I've gotten to do work around where the way I wrote the story, I would be inviting you to think this 7-year-old girl is ridiculous. She's obnoxious, she's fearful, she's anxious, she's paranoid, she's crazy. Because that's the way I was able to make sense of of the terror I was experiencing and the humiliation that was coming because of the terror that's what's being told to me. You're ridiculous, you're crazy, But getting into the story and actually seeing, no, this was a very terrifying moment and there was a misattunement here. And we can wrestle with the intentionality of that misattunement. Was it just a, tired parent? Was there deeper harm? whatever. What was happening to that 7-year-old was wrong and it was cruel. And so getting closer to like, oh, she's not just crazy. She's terrified for legitimate reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And opening that door, that maybe, yeah, I have to deal more with my powerlessness in that moment. I have to deal more with just the horror and the sorrow, that like it wouldn't have been that hard to eliminate the terror, but that's not what happened.
Yeah.
And I have a lifetime of debris of like how my body's had to metabolize terror over many seasons. And so I think that's what I mean by like an embodied, like a play with embodied hermeneutics, like
Yeah, I love
actually letting the story take up space in our bodies in a way that we've got to feel the interpretation differently.
You said something that took me out a little bit. You said children are incredible observers without having the luxury of being interpreters. And you were speaking to how going back to those childhood stories that, you know, you had to write because of attachment. Could you just explain what you mean by attachment there?
Yeah. I mean, the way we talk about the Allender Center, and I think it's just in line with the attachment research, is just that we're wired for love. You guys, we had a previous conversation. Sorry. And it was just so beautiful talking about like Kurt Thompson's, like we come into this world looking for someone who's looking for us. That's how God made us. We're wired for that. We're meant for good attunement, meaning anticipation of our needs, someone who delights in us and is looking for us and wants to provide for us and care for us. We're meant for honor and for a sense of like containment, right? Both in protection and when we don't. I have a 3.5-year-old who's very fierce. So I'm like, oh, you need some. No, it is bedtime.
Yeah.
We're going to bed. You're getting crazy. We got to go to bed. Like it's bedtime. Containment. But also when she freaks out, do I have the capacity to be like, I can remain calm. You can bring your personhood. No, I don't always have that capacity. I'm just going to be honest because I am a human being.
Yeah.
And we're meant for repair when there's rupture. And so, you know, what we know in attachment studies, and Eli Harwood, my friend Eli Harwood, and she went to the Seattle school. She writes on Attachment Nerd.
The Raising Securely Attached Kids.
Securely Attached Kids, right?
I'm reading that book right now. It's
so good. And she just clarifies so well that like, it's not like we have attachment or we don't have attachment. We have attachment, and it's either going to be secure attachment or it's going to be an insecure attachment. So for a lot of kids, when things go awry and it's not attuned well, there's not containment or there's not repair or rupture, the ways we maintain secure, like an attachment with that primary care provider is it becomes insecure, right? And so we get anxious or we get avoidant or there's ways we have to manage the fragility of that attachment. And so when we're talking about story and interpretation, we don't interpret mom's dangerous and like failing at love because what child can tolerate that? That's really scary. You need that primary care provider to be okay in your imagination. So we're going to internalize. And we might still think that's true, right? We might still manage our world in that way, but that's not going to come out in the relationship. It's going to be internalized, how to manage that terror. And so it's a little bit easier to say, I'm crazy than to say, mom's scary.
Oof. Yeah. Oof.
It's safer, I guess, in a little body, in a little nervous system.
Yep.
Because if I'm just scared, then maybe there's a chance I cannot be scared. Maybe there's some volition I can hold on to.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, internalizing that, metabolizing that, then creates wreckage the rest of your story where that remains the dominant narrative. It's amazing, Dan, before I even had the chance to ask the question, you already answered one of the questions I had written down. I had written down to ask that many men are taught explicitly or implicitly that strength means like moving on or not being a pussy and staying productive or staying in control. and the question was going to be, how do those messages shape the way that men relate to their stories, which Rachel was just naming with attachment, but you already were naming it with your story of fourth grade. I wonder what you would still say to that, but how do you think that story of fourth grade now popping up just a couple of years later, how do you think that message or these messages that we internalize when we're in fourth grade that we don't name, how do you see those shaping our stories?
Well, one of the things that we underscore is that we're broken. Of course, the reality of we've been sinned against, but we've also sinned. We've failed, and we attempt, as Rachel put it so well, we attempt to restore what can't be actually recreated without participation with another. We think we can do this alone. That's very deeply broken because we have a Trinitarian God who loves relationship to be the context for the healing of what harm brings in relationship. But when we hold that, we also sometimes miss the reality of our beauty, even in the midst of our brokenness. So part of the reality is, from fourth grade on, fifth grade, sixth grade, on to junior high, on to high school, I played well. I was a renowned All-American, All-State football player. Part of that rage was being, in many ways, put within a societally bound, rule-based culture called football. And in some sense, I probably would have done much more harm to myself and others without that. On the other hand, there's been a lot of ferocity that has been used to the kingdom of God to create things that other people chose not to do. So if we can look at the reality both and, not either or, we are broken, we are beautiful. Can we enter into both? Yes, I was harmed and it was wrong, but something of that ferocity also had a kind of glory arc and trajectory that God has used in other lives and my own life in a way in which can I do the work of being able to grieve what indeed harm came and yet bless that somehow even in that process, the God who creates order and beauty and harmony out of cacophony was at work doing something really good as well. So it's the both and that I think many of us don't go back to look at humiliation, but we also don't look back at those moments to be able to say, what was formed in me that is so lovely and honorable and useful for the kingdom of God.
Yeah. I think that's why we have this podcast, right? But I think that's the scary part to your point. That's the scariest thing about engaging our stories is it can feel overwhelming to face what was made to us to be because of what you were saying, Rachel, with attachment, what was made to us to feel like humiliation rather than harm that we felt alone in. Like you getting called a pussy in fourth grade playing football. If you have safe attachment with somebody, maybe that's held differently.
Yeah.
And so then it doesn't become a part of creating this ferocity in football, and it gets to be this energy you have that becomes, for Blake and I, world-changing energy that created things that helped create us too. And yeah, I think what we hear from men, maybe not in explicit ways, but what we hear from men is this overwhelm, and maybe it sometimes comes out as confusion of what we're even asking them to go back and look at our stories of harm I can remember many a session with guys going back and being like, okay, can you help me understand this part of your story? And they go, I don't understand why you want to talk about that when all I want to talk about is my porn addiction. Or we were talking on your podcast about gambling addiction, which is something that I think we need to talk about more. And or maybe I'm here to talk about my marital conflict with
my wife's behavior.
Wife. Yeah, I'm here to talk to you about how my wife is really the problem. Why do you want to talk to me about when I was 12 and I had this experience at baseball tryouts? That was something I was bringing up to Dan and Rachel on their podcast. But these moments that stick out so clearly to us from our childhood stories can feel overwhelming, I think, because of what you're speaking of, that it's hard to go back to a place of humiliation. And even last year, Dan, you said something on our show, I think that I quoted for the rest of the year, which was, you were talking about how you'd been given the opportunity to work with men of great strength and great accolade, and they were willing to take their bodies into places of battles, but they weren't willing to bring their hearts into it.
Yeah.
And we've heard some feedback of like men who we meet with feeling like, well, even that quote to them felt like saying, well, you're not doing enough. And I think that can somewhat speak to the sense of overwhelm, or how it exposes yet another weakness about them, that they can't go there. So how would you kind of help with those men, move them away from this being another condemnation of their imperfection to addressing their story with courage and with a word that I am in love with these days, compassion?
Well, let me go back to the category of broken and beautiful. Most men that I work with have a facility to be able to name brokenness in others, and certainly to some degree in their own life. What most men, and I think this is, shall we say, true for humanity, we have a very hard time owning the glory that has been written into each of our faces and to our lives. And that ability, not talking about I'm good at X, but all right, so if I'm good at X, but that it actually reveals something of the goodness that God has put within me. Like as we began, we didn't plan on that particular introduction, but Rachel names my generosity. I know it's true. I felt uncomfortable. And I've been in settings where something of my character has been acknowledged prior to preaching. And I'm like, come on. Let me get to do what I do. I do this. I talk. That's what I do. Stop talking about me. And yet, again, I'm in this bind. Part of me longs to hear that. And yet, there's something that feels terrified that the untruths of that will also be exposed. Can I bear my beauty when I know I'm broken? I can bear my brokenness knowing that I'm meant to become beautiful, but can I bear the beauty that already exists? And for many men, but most people, I think have a very hard time embracing and enjoying the glory that they reveal about the glory of God.
I also think that that statement too is just, there's a lot of heartbreak in feeling like this is another way I've done something wrong, because I would say there's a lot of reasons why it's not been safe to bring your heart, why it's been more familiar and safer to bring your body. And Storywork's a way to get to some of the, like, how did it become unsafe to bring your heart? And when did it become safer to go offline? Like, I think about one of my favorite people in the universe told me a story once with a lot of pride about, like, when they were 3, they were on an anthill, fire anthill, and were being, like, bitten by fire ants and they were crying, which is a pretty normal response for a 3-year-old. And their father said, well, what are you going to do? Just sit there and cry about it? And the way they told this story, again, the meaning they made was like, thank God my father taught me to be tough because life's been pretty brutal. And that's how I've survived. I know this person well enough to know it's also been a pretty brutal coping mechanism that's kept them from a lot of life and caused a lot of harm.
Yep.
But when they bring the dad up that story, I think, oh my gosh, like how unsafe was your world that like you couldn't even cry when you were being bit by fire ants, like let alone when someone broke your heart or someone mocked you or, you know, you were sad about something really reasonable. So I think it's, when did it
so
become
helpful.
unsafe?
Yeah.
I want to give a real time example maybe of what we're talking about. And I promise this was not intentionally set up. This could feel very performative, but it's not. And I know, Dan, we got to keep time. So I want to make this concise, but if you're listening, I mean, we can say it on, if you're listening to this and you've heard us like mention each other's show, it's because we just like had the chance to record each other's back to back, release them separately. So we've had the privilege of sitting with them for now nearly 2 hours in a row. And something that has been stirring in me during these conversations that I just realized kind of midway through this one, and I'm saying this as like, oh, this is why we do the story work, or at least this is part of why. Our listeners will know that I have a very complex, currently non-existent, estranged relationship with my father. And it has been very broken for more than half my life now at this point. And subsequently, I have had parts of me that have really sought out for the like care and validation from men who could be father figures, men older than me, men who I respect, men who I look up to. And not everybody, but I have also, and Jamie knows these people, have been very significant stories of harm from those other men that these parts of me were trying to seek as this mentor. And so what I realized through this conversation is like, I don't know you personally, Dan, but you would be in that category of men that I look up to that have had a real impact in my life. And I'm sitting here realizing, like, I can remember thinking early on, starting listening to your show, feeling the like desire to be able to meet, like, not just be a listener of the podcast, but be able to meet Dan. And now I have this experience where like I've met Dan and we've even swapped shows, and he's even like saying all these great things about me, about us, Jamie, but like about me. And I'm sitting here realizing that like it's not really what I wanted. Like something feels missing, and it has nothing to do with Dan. Well, I don't know if you guys saw it because I was trying not, like, there was some beautiful stuff being said, but like I started to get emotional because it was this moment of being like, oh wow, I'm getting this experience, and in some ways this corrective experience with this person, and it's not all of what I thought it was going to be in this like sustaining way. And I've done some work around this, and so I noticed this like, oh wow, there's this, and I can get emotional. I will get emotional again because I don't care to cry, Rachel. There's this little boy that is still, even in this work that I'm doing now, running around to these older men in my life, being like, please see me. Like, please tell me I'm important. Please tell me I'm valuable. And then I'm getting it from you, Dan. And that in a way is healing, but also in a way I am just like when I'm not connected to that story, I'm just like watching him run around, like seeking for this thing. And so I just had this moment of like, gosh, dude, like, I'm so sorry that I've missed, even in some of this good work that I'm doing, like I've missed you. Like I didn't see you in that way, seeking out for that. And Jamie, you said your favorite word being compassion. It was just this internal small moment of like, I see you now, and like we can talk later. And also, can I use you as an example to make this sink for people? But like, that's to me, and I promise again, that was not, it's not intentionally set up, but like, that's why, at least for me, that's why I do the story. Because if not, I would leave being like, oh man, maybe Dan isn't really who I thought he was, or maybe I need to go find somebody else that I think will fill this void. But it's really not about that. It's about like that connection with myself, and then and realizing like, oh, I'm actually seeking for, like, he's running around like looking for God the Father, really, but just putting all of the marbles into the basket of what whoever this older man is that I look up to is giving in front of me. Is that clear?
So honoring, and honoring in that you are so tender to that young boy.
Yeah.
There's something that is still a 4-year-old, 8-year-old for all of us that's running around. But on the other side of it is, again, I don't know you, I'm postulating, but, you've got a significantly narcissistic father who, when he did shine on you, he shined on you like the moon. You were to be a reflection of his glory. And to the degree that you gave him glory by being a reflection of his glory, then there was some possibility of connection. But when you, in one sense, take your glory as your own, instead of being the moon, you've chosen to be a sun. In this case, S-U-N. You've chosen to be a sun, a bright, shining presence of something of the glory of God. The price is your beauty will never be honored as you would most desire. And that's true for every one of us. When we live out the glory of God, for the most part, it's either ignored or denied or chipped away at. And so you're now having to hold, you are an S-U-N, you are a son. And yet you still, like all of us, need to tend to that beautiful but heartbroken boy who had to reflect glory back in order to have any glory at all. So the combination, you are a boy and you are the son. Well, no wonder there is the opportunity to name that. And I'm honored to be one of those presences that it doesn't shine on you as the sun and you're the moon, but in this case, two suns, both S-U-N and also S-O-N.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to help us land the plane because I think Blake needs a minute after that. I need a minute, but I'm going to.
I'm not even on the plane anymore.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
I have exited out of the plane.
Yeah. I think for many people who are listening, we have a lot of people in our community who are already doing this work of story. And hopefully this is a reminder and an encouragement to keep going for them. But I think we also have some people who have come to this podcast. Maybe they were looking for another fix because they're feeling tired of the work and hesitant or unsure what step to take next. So from both of you, I'd be curious, like, as we land here, like, how would you encourage them? What would you want them to hear as they try to move towards some of this work?
Now we've moved on from finger points and just like eye contact. Oh, goodness.
Shall I go first, Rachel?
Yeah.
Well, I was taken back when Rachel said 20 years we've been working together. But one of the first experiences I had with Rachel was she was a brilliant young theologian who I got to hire to work with me and another fellow to work on a book called Sabbath. And the sweetness of being involved with people that are colleagues, that are friends, that bear the privilege of seeing over this case, decades, the goodness of how our two lives have played together, called me to be a better man and a better husband and a better friend. All I can say is that the costs are huge. The benefits are infinitely more. If, only if, somehow you desire to be caught up in the glory of God, if something of the goodness of being called to become who you were really meant to be, there's nothing better than the privilege of story interacting with story, growing story. So we're two stories and we are different. In so many different ways. I'm normal. I am just normal. She's
That's
not.
normal.
She is not. So the framework of the playground of being able to grow with friends, I just think is one of the sweet gifts of stepping into story.
Yeah.
And I will go much more on the ground in the sense of, if you are someone who's like, love that, I just need some help. Obviously, we have a lot of offerings at the Allender Center that could be of help. We have online courses that are more asynchronous that kind of get into some of this and allow you to move at your own pace. We have a story workshop coming up in the summer that's more of like a general story workshop where you could bring a story and try this out. And we have trainings that help people think about how to bring this to the worlds that they inhabit. But
Awesome.
I think sometimes you just got to dip your toe in and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, love that. We want to push everybody to those things.
Yes.
Yeah, I've done one of those story workshops here in Nashville when y'all came here.
Yeah.
So they're wonderful. So, Blake, any last thoughts?
Nope. Other than just it's a privilege to know you all. And I used to think, like, listening to the show for such a long time, not knowing you, that it was just a privilege to learn from you and like to learn the knowledge that each of you have, and what it is that. But as I've had the privilege of getting to sit with you guys separately and now together a few times, the deeper privilege is to see the way that in the midst of how much you know and how smart you guys both are, I don't know what that's like to hear, but you guys are both incredibly smart and really, really good at articulating very complex things. The greater privilege is to see how you all lead with such humility of like, not in saying it this way, but like, we are smart and here's all these things we've learned and we're going to teach you about it. And also we like suck at it sometimes. Like that's the greater human privilege. That's like, okay,
Amen.
yes, that's the reality. And so I'm really grateful to have to be able to experience that side of you all. It makes the work you teach so much more hopeful and
accessible.
Accessible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you both. Thank you both.
We're really privileged to have y'all on. Everybody, please go check out the Allender Center offerings and make sure you go listen to the Allender Center podcast. And we are, as always, we're glad you're here. Keep showing up. You're worth it.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode. Listen, we're working on some really practical resources to help you connect more deeply with yourself and others. So if you head over to our website, 3percentco.com, you can learn more about that. The link will be in the show notes. And this is the part of the show where we ask you for some help. Listen, we don't have a big fancy production team. We're recording these in my therapy office in between sessions and in the margins of our life. We just really believe in the message that much. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and rarely would I take the time to review and rate a show, just because honestly, I forgot. It wasn't until we started doing this show that I realized doing that actually really does help these platforms notice our show and get the word out. And so if any of this is impactful to you, we would love it if you took a second to leave us a review, rate us, or if you want to just do it the old-fashioned way, text this link to a friend and say, hey, let's talk about this episode. Whatever you do, make sure to follow us on whatever platform you're listening to so you never miss an episode. We're really grateful you're here, and we'll see you next week.
So let's be honest.